Joining me now from Tamaki Makoto's Labour headquarters. Is this the Britomart headquarters that you're in at the moment?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got Shanan Halbert, List MP, who's based up in Northcote, who I really wish was my local MP, and Carmel Sepuloni, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, based from Kelston. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for being here.
Carmel, what are your plans for should you get in 2026 or before, depending on when the election happens, to improve what the government have done so far with the Ministry of Social Development?
Oh, thanks so much for that question, Blake. Well, we had a whole overall plan based around the Welfare Expert Advisory Group's report. I think everyone's aware that we had implemented some of the recommendations, done some of the work, and each year I was reporting to Cabinet on what would come next. Now, we haven't had the opportunity to do any of that stuff since 2003 because obviously we weren't re-elected into government, but I think that plan still stands. That report is an amazing report that provides a roadmap for us moving forward, and we should stick to that roadmap. I am keen to make sure, though, that I'm hearing from the sector with regards to whether or not that's still the right plan, which parts of it they think need to be prioritised, and also what they think a new government should prioritise in terms of reinstating stuff that may have been cancelled by this national government or changing things that this national government is doing. So there will be a lot to do when we get re-elected. We're planning for that to be in 2 years, by the way. So we are doing the mahi now to make sure that we're ready to run.
How much work is going on in the background, actually, for the election at the moment?
Well, we've got our policy committees from the party as well as us with our portfolios. Chris, as leader, asked all of us to provide portfolio plans for how we're going to engage with stakeholders over the next 2 years, how we're going to manage and prioritise policy considerations, and opportunities in the portfolio moving forward, as well as challenges in the portfolio. So we've all got quite a lot of work in front of us, and we've got our leader watching over that work to ensure that each and every one of us is fulfilling our responsibilities with our portfolios.
Part of my work in the Auckland Issues portfolio has been getting out across Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, talking to our key stakeholders, both friends of Labour, and also speaking to those who aren't friends of Labour. But people do know the reality of politics and the possibility of us picking up government in 2026. So they understand the importance of that dialogue, that kōrero happening, to ensure that we're able to, that any future government's able to support the city to do well, whether that be through productivity, whether it's getting on top of some of the poverty that we see in the city. But, I always talk about my story of why I came to Auckland, and that was for opportunity and prosperity. And that's the story of many Aucklanders.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting to make that connection with people, but under that with stakeholders, it's a real rebuild for us in Auckland. We know we didn't do well here. We want to do better, and we know the importance of Auckland, not only to people that live in the city, but to the whole of Aotearoa New Zealand. This country will benefit from Auckland doing well. So, we're out doing the hard yards and the mahi at the moment in that rebuild, working with our MPs that are across the city. And we're accelerating our listening campaign, getting out amongst business and community. And I think since we chatted last time, we've had Chris Hipkins here, our caucus, do our retreat out, meeting with stakeholder groups. So there's not a shortage of effort and mahi going on.
Yeah.
But as you would appreciate, and our people out there, is that it's a build project where we can regain that trust and confidence, where people may not have felt that from our government. They wanted change, but sadly, so many people are coming back to us at the moment and say we voted for change, but this isn't quite what we saw. And the reality for Aucklanders is that it's becoming more expensive to live here under this government.
You talk about how you were on the channel last time, and you were talking about starting to see a bit of voter regret. So you were just talking there about it. How much have you seen an increase since the last time you're on the channel?
Quite a lot. Not everyone's at the regret stage, but certainly people are thinking, what the heck is this government focused on? This isn't quite the things that we thought they were going to focus on. When we lean back into sort of the anti-Māori sentiment that this government has rolled out, that wasn't everyone's intention. That's not what people voted for. They didn't want race relations to become a difficult part in this country. The thing they did vote for was cost of living relief. And the national government has talked quite often about the repeal of the regional fuel tax. That saved Aucklanders about $2 a week. But in reality, they've added on additional costs and registration fees, fuel excise tax, public transport. Funding has been taken away and people are feeling the effects on that.
Yeah.
I spoke in the House this week that for the average whānau living in Auckland, it's about $80 more than what it was under our government. So, I'm not convinced that Simeon Brown is the Minister of Auckland or this government, in fact, has any plans around cost of living relief. And my other issues for the Auckland portfolio is around crime and congestion, and I'm not seeing any action on that as well.
Yeah. I have to say, there's been a lot of things happening lately where we're all going, what's going on? Last week we had Pingate, where ACT were adamant they must be able to wear their lapel pins in their house and were putting their foot down and standing up for themselves over it. We had a complaint from the ACT Party alleging racism in our select committee just because the opposition members didn't feel that an ACT Party member was experienced enough or the right person to chair a subcommittee with OT submissions coming through, and a range of other things. And sometimes we're in Wellington going, this is not what I'm here for, but you're forced into a position where you have to comment, provide context on these particular issues, and it all feels very trivial when you put it into the context of what really does matter for New Zealanders at the moment. And it's some of the stuff that Shannon's talking about. It's certainly not about a person's right to wear a pin with their political logo on it in a space. So, yeah, it's been a bit strange down there, I have to say.
But we had the report come out on children in care.
State care, yes.
And at the same time, this government slams through boot camps as a priority. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
And does the Marty Wards
within 24 hours.
Yes.
No council wants to.
24 hours within that report, and they're like, boot camps. Which actually brings me to my next question, because that's a really good example of the government using spin to put out disinformation. All the research on boot camps, for example, show the same thing. This is a cycle of abuse that's going to keep going while they keep doing this kind of action. How do you guys look at that disinformation and combat it?
Look, I mean, all you can do is try and put all of the facts on the table and then constantly reiterate those. But the government will do what the government will do, and the government will say what the government will say. One of the really good examples of where it just continues to get spun is where the government made the conscious decision to change the way in which benefits would increase each year, attaching it back to CPI rather than wage growth, knowing full well that will save them money that they can then use for their tax cuts, but that in the short, mid, long term, beneficiaries will end up with less money. And yet they refuse to state clearly that it is a cut to beneficiaries, even though it is, And so there are times where you feel like, as a politician, you're getting gaslit, and certainly that the country is getting gaslit by this government. But we just have to persevere and just keep saying on record what is right and true, and hope that resonates and gets through to New Zealanders. Another classic example this week: employment rates came out, and of course that's got worse. Government refused to take any ownership over the fact that they may have had a role in this, despite the fact that one of their first actions was to make cuts so that leading to inevitably thousands fewer New Zealanders employed in the public sector. Well, all of that has flow-on impacts. And so, here we are now with worse employment than what they had when they took office, more New Zealanders out of work, 21,000 more New Zealanders on benefit, and yet they continue to say that they have no role in this. They're not responsible for it. It's about a situation they inherited. Well, actually, they do have responsibility. They are in charge now, and they have been for the last 9 months.
Looking at those numbers actually for MSD, there's some really disproportionate outcomes there looking at Māori and Pacifica communities, in particular when it comes to the rate of sanctions that this government's reintroduced. Is there something that people can sort of look at and go, look, this is what's causing that disproportionate sanction numbers? Or is it, because the government is feeding this through having deliberately anti-Māori policies, that sort of comes through to MSD and their decision-making process? Or is there other factors that might be leading to that?
Well, Māori are disproportionately represented on the benefit. I think it is important to note that. And of course, given the range of social challenges that many of the whānau on benefit face, are particularly vulnerable. And so, I'm not surprised that there's a disproportionate impact for Māori in particular, and for Pacific when it comes to sanctioning. But we have to be clear, the government, because the economy's not doing well, because people are losing jobs at a higher rate, there are going to be more people coming on to benefit. And so what we're inevitably seeing is a government trying to, I believe, make it more difficult for people to come on to benefit, and as well utilising tools like sanctions as a way of making it difficult for people to stay on benefit. Because really those are their only two strategies for trying to reduce the numbers. There aren't the jobs out there for people to go into, and so these are the only two strategies that I think they are trying to utilise in any way, and they're not good. That's not a good way to treat people who are in the welfare system.
This sort of approach also continues to the way that this government thinks about young people. And I like to think that when
we're in government, about young people?
Do they?
Well, when we were in government, I like to think that we really thought about hope and aspiration and opportunity, and carving pathways for people to enable them in their life, whether that be through education and employment. But what we're seeing in this government is at one extreme, the boot camps mentality, where every approach is punitive. And then we go through to their focus in education, which is micromanaging. It's really old school, back to the 90s. It's like a bunch of, like our parents have told us that we have to go back and do 1 hour of reading, writing, and arithmetic in order for us to be good. And any educator knows that we need to empower our young people, give them self-belief, and change the ways that people teach and learn in modern settings. And when we take a punitive approach, young people, particularly in this generation, just don't respond to that to do better than where they're currently at. So, and then again, the other extreme is over to charter schools, where
you won't have to do any of that.
Where the government says, do whatever the heck you want. Here's the measurements. And David Seymour saying that's tino rangatiratanga in action. And I've challenged him in the House to say, well, firstly, tino rangatiratanga didn't come from a model over in the States.
So another role that you hold, Shannon, is the rainbow community. So how disheartening is it to have seen for you so much attack and so much issue taken with the rainbow community within this term already?
When I reflect on this, I just think, how the heck did we get here? Where we've come as a country from being so progressive for our rainbow communities. And I was in our rainbow room at Parliament yesterday, showing people around, and looked at the legislation of marriage equality and the first bill that I was a part of with banning conversion practices. That is true progress. And to come to a place where it seems that everyone wants to go backwards on recognising people for who they are, who they love, addressing the mental health concerns of young people from our rainbow community. Suddenly this government stepped away from that. And it's been really sad for me, and a punch in the guts, really. I think is how the rainbow community feels when you have the Deputy Prime Minister openly commenting on somebody that they believe is a trans person in the Olympic Games, boxing, and then you find out a few hours later that factually that isn't true, and the Deputy Prime Minister is unwilling to withdraw those sorts of comments. How was this of interest to people in such high leadership roles within the New Zealand government? How do people feel included in this country if our most established leaders aren't seen to be advocating for them? So that's the sad part for me. When you're in government, you have to govern for everyone. You can't just govern for your particular groups. And that's an important lesson that I think we've taken on board after a loss. It's something that we have to take forward. But, we've got to build a country based on progress and where we accept one another for who they are and we celebrate that.
How does that comment from Winston Peters make us look, knowing that he's our foreign minister? From an international perspective, has there been any issues that you guys have come across from how it represents us as a country?
Well, the thing that the Deputy Prime Minister did was comment on X, formerly known as Twitter, too quickly without actually finding the facts. Even if that was his position, I personally try not to react or respond to that sort of commentary, because I believe that it gives him a platform to spread hate towards the trans and rainbow community. My focus really has been on raising the safety issues of our rainbow community with the Minister of Police. Over a month ago, I wrote to him with concerns about rainbow crossings, Destiny Church protests outside of schools. That is fear and intimidation of young people. That is damage to property. And I called on Mark Mitchell to come up with a community safety plan for the rainbow community, because these issues need to be taken seriously. To me, those are the things that count. We've got to come back and go, how do we ensure that people feel safe in our community, particularly our young people and their whānau? But sadly, a month on, I haven't heard back from Minister Mitchell, so I suspect it's not a priority for him.
So you've written to Mr. Mitchell and asked him to look into these issues. How concerned are you for the safety, reiterating on your comment about the rainbow community's safety?
I've been really concerned about their safety. With the hate that's spread, it really impacts on the mental health of our children and young people. And, we've got evidence and research time and time again that rainbow young people are overrepresented in poor mental health statistics and suicide. And that comes directly from not feeling included and accepted in their whānau community and in society. For the minister not to respond in the first instance, I can deal with the politics of that. But I hope in the background that he has taken this seriously and he's working with New Zealand Police to improve their practices. I think New Zealand Police are doing what they can to deal with these issues. But it's not fair that a religious group like Destiny Church stands outside a school. If it was any other protest group, parents would not accept that. And the police, I believe, would treat it quite differently. So, to have that fear and intimidation, I don't think is fair. I think it's very unsafe. And I think we need to take action on that and start treating the rainbow community as a priority in any sense, just like they would others.
Yeah.
What would you like to see the government do about Mr. Tamaki and the Destiny Church?
People are free to have their views. The moment that you intimidate or children and their whānau feel unsafe, embarrassed, because in some cases young people are going to these places, they haven't come out to their whānau, and you've got these people standing outside making them feel embarrassed, uncomfortable about who they are.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, that's the behaviours, the negative behaviours that I want to end. That's what needs to be taken care of. What Brian Tamaki preaches within his four walls of his church, I don't really care. But what I do care about is our young rainbow rangatahi, that they're able to live in the community and be proud of who they are.
Yeah.
I'll say I'm going to change the topics a little bit, but it does kind of tie into making sure people in the community feel like they belong. I'd like to know about Marty Wards. Obviously, a big topic at the moment with everything that's going back and forth. Thousands of submissions for the Select Committee, and the vast majority of them were against the changes that the government's made. We saw not that long ago, Kaipara rushed through to get rid of the Māori ward. Do Labour have plans for what they would do when they get back in power? Are we looking at a return to what we've got, or some other sort of path forward to make sure that that representation is there?
Yeah, let's be very clear that the repeal of Māori Wards is discriminatory policy. It's designed to obstruct Māori from having representation at our council tables. That's not afforded to the likes of rural wards or other population groups. It's just there for Māori, and on that basis, that's what makes it discriminatory. What's important for us is that over the next couple of years, that we work with councils directly to identify how they best achieve Māori wards, if that's what they want, or representative models. I take one example, and personally, I'm a big fan of Māori wards. Every council that established Māori wards has seen the benefits. The Kaipara Council is sort of an outlier in that sense. But we've seen in the media, I guess, some of the discrimination that's come over that period since that Māori ward was established. But a big shout out to Palmerston North, who have supported the Māori ward to continue. When we come back into government, we will certainly be working with councils to establish Māori wards where they want them, or put good representative practices in place. I mean, the majority of councils that established Māori wards wanted to keep them. They thought that the government repealing this at their cost is an absolute overreach. This was a government that campaigned on local democracy, and here they are sort of taking control of something that isn't a priority for councils. The part that I said directly to the Minister in the House was about when it comes to councils who are low on funding at the moment, they've had to increase rates, and there's a cost afforded to them of, let's say, $50,000 in order to ask their community if they want to keep a Māori ward. They are just going to say no, many of them, because they simply can't afford to do that. That's not fair, and that's another layer of discrimination. So Labour certainly supports Māori wards, and will be working with councils to establish the best representative model for them moving forward.
Did either of you read the Future for Government local government report?
You have to read it.
I realise this is probably more Kieran's field of expertise, with it being his portfolio, and the timing of it was terrible because it came out sort of just before the election. But it pointed out one of the really big issues is voter turnout, like just getting people out to vote in local body elections. Any ideas on how people could fix that? How you get the voter turnout up on something like that?
I think we've all been saying for a long time that postal voting is hardly a modern way of engaging with the democratic system, but we don't have a credible and reliable alternative at the moment. So we're not in a place, I guess, where we're able to move beyond the postal ballot voting. I do think that this should be a priority, really, because I said to a number of people, even our letterboxes are becoming strange items at the front of our house. How often are they checked? What do we receive through the mail these days? And so I do think that this should be a priority over the next few years with respect to how people can engage and cast their vote, because postal voting is so last century, maybe even the century before in some ways, but yeah.
And we did do some of this work when we were in government, and one of those recommendations was to take forward the Make It 16 campaign, which
we're supportive of,
which enabled us to dip our toe in as a country in local government and see if this works, whether it improves civics education in one sense and participation in the other. Again, this government isn't really prioritising the things that are important.
So just to wind down, so just to clarify, the Labour Party supports both 16 for general and local elections.
I think we were looking at doing a phased option on that. I mean, I personally am, Blake. I personally am. I think probably Shanan is too. Can't recall exactly what our policy was, but I think the starting point might have been with local body.
Was that under 16?
Yeah.
Yeah.
16,
so
16.
Starting point. First step was to take it through local government.
And just to finish off, how disappointed as the Parliament was it seeing only a 30%-ish turnout in Tauranga recently?
Well, look at the result. It wasn't a result that was unexpected for a city like Tauranga. I think there's probably some missed opportunities in that. We're lucky enough to get one Māori up, I think, in quite a significant part of New Zealand.
And Blake, to be honest, because the turnout is just so low all of the time, particularly in seats where you have large numbers of Māori, Pacific and young people, then it doesn't come as too much of a surprise that there'd only be 30% turnout for the Tauranga election. However, we want to be better than that, and so that is why some thinking needs to go into this moving forward.
Politics is hard at the moment, and the part that I'm really worried about is how the public perceives politicians. And when I say that this government isn't focused on the things that the public necessarily wanted or voted for, that feeds into people's perceptions that politicians aren't always there for their interests, that they lack their confidence in their local politicians. And we need to really improve that, because so many of us work really hard in our local communities, but are let down by some of the pettiness that I think we're seeing in New Zealand's political landscape.
And we all get tainted with that, to be honest. I think it doesn't matter which political party is responsible for the trivial behaviour or the actions that bring into question integrity. It taints all of us, and so we're very mindful of that, and wanting to be perceived as trusted public figures that New Zealanders can rely on. But it is difficult.
That are focused on housing, health, and education.
Things that matter.
Sorry. Finally, in your position as Auckland Issues spokesperson, Shanan, how are you feeling about the new water done well, especially in your area, because that's where it was lifted off from?
Yeah, so the National Party policy is still more expensive than what we proposed for Auckland. My greater concern is that it cuts off places like Taitokero in Northland. I can't see how three councils across Northland are ever going to be able to finance water infrastructure, and suddenly we start to create a 2-3 state society when it comes to the basics of clean water in our households. Northland's struggling already. There's other parts down Tairāwhiti, down the east coast and in the South Island, where I think they haven't thought it through very well. It pushes the responsibility away from central government onto local government, and that will see an increase in rates.
Ultimately, right now, in particular, with the cost of living being on the minds of New Zealanders more than anything else, and just struggling to pay those basic everyday costs, this is a really bad thing.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to wrap everything up. Shanan, Carmel, thank you so much for joining us today. Very much appreciated. Keep up the great work. It's fantastic having you here.
Thank you.
Tēnā kōrua.